So I think one reason we like to think that there is this person that if I meet them, then life is all going to be rainbows and unicorns. If I don't, I'll be lonely. One reason we like that is because it absolves us from having to grow. So if there's this person that we just magically will accept each other for the rest of our life, fully accept each other, then I don't have to grow. I don't have to get better at loving.
This is Ryan and Michelle, and welcome to the Celebrate MarriageCast, where we hope to restore and reclaim godly marriages through honest and real conversations.
Welcome to episode 80. Oh my goodness, Ryan.
Yeah.
Episode 80. And we are so glad that you're joining us today. We are so proud of you for investing in your marriage relationship, in your dating relationship, whatever stage you're in. We're just really proud of you for being here and working on learning and growing in your relationship. And today we have a treat. We have an author joining us. Ryan and I have read his book. It was fantastic, and we are so excited for him to share his wisdom with you. So we are excited to introduce Jon R. Anderson and his book, The Acceptance. Jon has worked with thousands of couples, you guys, thousands of couples and individuals, conducting more than 160 marriage intensives, dozens of marriage retreats, numerous relationship courses, training hundreds to facilitate effective marriage classes. He has a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, has 18 years experience teaching college-level courses in psychology and human development. He also hosts a podcast, Relationship Rewire, and is the author of Growing Love and 365 Days of Growing Love. He's also the founder of the Growing Love Network, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to revolutionizing relationships for lifelong love. So I think you, our listener, are going to learn a ton from him today. What an impressive bio. Jon, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
I feel like we should all be, paying for this. I feel like, this professional psychology level course and college level course that we're about to take here. So we're so excited to have you. Could you tell us a little bit about your family and just your background and a little bit about you personally?
Sure. I've been married to Joanna for 40 years in May.
Wow.
May 11th will be 40 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. We have 3 grown children, and they are all married. And between them, we have 7 grandchildren. One was just born last week.
Congratulations.
So, yeah. So that's pretty much takes up every minute of our spare time. Taking care of grandkids or that kind of stuff, which we love.
Yeah. Awesome. And where's home for you? Are you in Texas?
Yes. So we raised our kids, and for 25 years we lived in San Antonio, and I was an elder at Oak Hills Church. If you've heard of a guy named Max Lucado.
Okay. Yep. May have heard of Max Lucado. Yep. Yes.
That's the pastor there.
Cool.
And that's where we raised our kids, but our kids all got married and moved off. And so we sold our house a few years ago, and we've been living in an apartment up there for the last 3 years. And finally, tomorrow we're closing on our more permanent residence there. So.
Oh my gosh. So you're in between grandson being born and moving, and you carved out time for this podcast. Thank you. Yeah. Hey, and really quick.
I'm sorry. I'm back in San Antonio right now because I'm doing our 172nd intensive this weekend.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Okay. That's incredible. Yeah. Your book said 160. So now you're up to 172. That's so cool. Yeah. Question before we start, you referenced South Dakota in your book. You had an analogy about a goat farm in South Dakota. Have you been to South Dakota?
I have.
Okay. Very cool.
I always forget, is Fargo's North Dakota, right?
No. Yep. Fargo's North Dakota.
I'm sorry. No, yes. My dad I'm actually born in British Columbia, and my dad was born and raised in Saskatchewan.
Okay.
And so I grew up, we moved from Canada to Texas in 1971, but all my dad's family's still up there. And so we go through South Dakota and going back and forth every time. In fact, I'm going to be up there doing a marriage retreat this summer up in Saskatchewan for a bunch of rangers and their spouses.
Very cool. So you pass through. The next time we pass through, you'll have to let our team here know, and we could meet up for lunch or something.
Yeah.
So very cool.
That's cool. Well, Jon, we're going to dig into your book, The Acceptance. And first of all, this was a fantastic book. I loved it. There were so many kind of ahas throughout, and so many things that I'm excited to jump into. Yeah,
I feel like there were a lot of new concepts to us. We've read a lot of books on marriage doing this podcast, and there were a couple of things in particular that were like, whoa, we've never read about that before.
Yeah. And I think what I'm excited about, Jon, is I feel like there's a few different things that are really almost countercultural in the book. And I love that you dive in, and we're going to talk about a couple of these today, of just what marriage is, what relationships are, those things that motivate us to find a partner. We're gonna jump into some of that today.
Yeah, very cool.
All right.
So, yeah, really, really excited. So, Jon, to start off here, you start off the book right away, with this idea of acceptance. You talk about the hierarchy of needs, that a lot of people have probably heard, this concept before. But why is this so important? And really, why the book? Why is acceptance so important?
Sure. Well, to start off with the hierarchy of needs, anybody who's taken if you graduated from high school in the U.S., then you might have not, like myself, I wasn't paying attention the first time I was talking. But it's Abraham Maslow, one of the pioneers in psychology. Back in the 40s, he came up with this model to describe what motivates us for anything. And it's so useful. It's still being. I taught psychology for 18 years, and every textbook we ever used for intro to psychology included Maslow's hierarchy. So it's still being used today. And so what it's a pyramid, and it says here's what motivates us. And at the bottom is food, water, shelter, air. If we're missing any of those, then we're not going to be motivated by anything above that. Once we have those, then the next level, we're motivated to find safety, to have relative safety. Once we have all that, then we're motivated to what in most of, he massaged the model for, over the years, but most of them, he uses the word belonging. And then the one after that is, basically about finding your purpose in the world, in the group, in your family, in your neighborhood, in your church, whatever. And then the last one is self-actualization, where if you've got all that stuff going on, then you start to you're motivated to be the best you can be. And it's not like you go through these in stages in life. It's any time of the day, you could be way up at the top, and then all of a sudden you can drop down to the bottom based on what's going on. But so it's a pretty useful model. It does explain, I think, a lot of human behavior and what motivates us. But one problem I have with it is that I believe that belonging, the third step in the pyramid, actually belongs at the bottom. And so the reason I say this is because if you don't feel like, and I use the word acceptance because I think it describes to me more what Maslow's talking about. Because you can pay your dues and attend all the meetings of a club, so you belong to that club. But if every time you go to a meeting, nobody wants to sit by you or talk to you, you're not accepted. That's really what he's getting at. So If you have all the food, shelter, air, and water you need, and you feel relatively safe, but you don't believe that you at least have the hope of being accepted, then you don't care about living. So, and the book, I don't want to use up too much time, but it starts off with talking about my nephew, Landon, who he had all the first two levels, but he also was schizoaffective, which means he had schizophrenia plus bipolar disorder. And it was getting so difficult for him to feel accepted in this world and by people. And so, of course, his own family, all of us, we bent over backwards to work with this. And I was just out kayaking with him about a few weeks before he took his own life. But and he was on a manic time at that time. But even if we have all that from a good family, and some people don't, even if, your family fully accepts you no matter what, that's great. But I think there's a part of us that we want to know that somebody who doesn't have to, because we're family, somebody that they would pick us over everyone else, and they would continue to choose us for the rest of our life, even though they get to know all the stuff that's not so acceptable about all of us, which we all do stuff that's not acceptable. So the more that I delved into this, the more I started looking through this lens, especially with my clients, I can see it's at the core of almost everything of what drives us, especially what drives us to look for a mate in the first place. So.
Yeah, John, I think that's so good, and I think it's that concept of finding that mate, that person that will accept you, that knows everything about you and accepts you. Mm-hmm. I think that's such a beautiful way of putting it, of choosing you regardless of that.
It sees you for who you are, all of your flaws, and loves you.
Yeah,
in spite of all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. John, you introduced a term called limerence in the book. I guess you didn't introduce it. It's been a word, but it was new for Ryan. It was new for you, right?
Heard it before.
I never heard of it either. Will you talk about this word limerence? Am I saying it right, first of all?
Limerence, yeah.
Limerence. Sorry, limerence.
Limerence.
Limerence. Will you tell our listeners a little bit about that term and how it plays out in relationships? Because that was really, as we read the chapters about it, it was like, oh my goodness, that is a real thing. And how does that play out in marriages?
Sure. Well, it's the scientific term for what most of us call madly in love. Mm. And so, by the way, if you Google this term, well, the last time I Googled, it's been a while, but I think it was like 1.5 million different references to it. There's a ton of and there's ongoing research into it. If you Google a guy named Max Haber, you only get about 500,000 hits.
Okay.
So do you know who Max Haber is?
I don't.
No.
Do you?
I don't. It was referenced in the book, but I don't. I didn't know.
So yeah, most people don't know who that is. Well, Max Haber is probably responsible for more lives than anybody who's ever lived.
Oh yes, I do remember the story you told. He
was a German chemist that at the time when the Industrial Revolution back in the 1800s was making the population of the world was just exploding, but the current farming methods couldn't keep up with food supply. And so there was millions of people starving all over the world every year because of lack of food. Well, then he comes along and formulates modern fertilizer. And so within a decade, the food supply was caught up to what the world needed. So he saved a bunch of millions of lives there. Then along comes World War I, and he invents mustard gas. Then along comes World War II, and he invents the gas used in the Holocaust gas chambers. So that was, well over 10 million people there. So here's the point I'm making. Nobody really wants to know about Max Haber because it's not a nice story. We want a story with an obvious good guy and an obvious bad guy, right? And ones where we can't say, are you the hero or are you the villain? Those just don't, we don't want to hear those stories. Because they're too real life, I think. Yeah. I think the one reason that people haven't heard of limerence is because it kind of shatters this idea of a soulmate. Now, I like to think of Joanna as my soulmate, but it's not because it was written in the stars from the dawn of time that God had picked her out for me. I picked Joanna out. I think. Well, in your case, Ryan, I'm guessing your first wife was your soulmate.
Sure. Yeah.
And now you are, Michelle, right? So it's not like there's only this one person. Yeah. And so I think one reason we like to think that there is this person that if I meet them, then life is all going to be rainbows and unicorns. If I don't, I'll be lonely. One reason we like that is because it absolves us from having to grow. So if there's this person that we just magically will accept each other for the rest of our life, fully accept each other, then I don't have to grow. I don't have to get better at loving, right? I don't have to practice getting better and learning how. And so we like that idea. And it goes back to the core of acceptance. I want to be accepted just as I am. So I think that's one reason. But so let me explain a little bit what happens when someone is falling in love. You have all these things called neurotransmitters in your body that your body feeds them to your brain, and your brain passes these chemicals back and forth. And everything you do, everything you think, and everything you feel is the result, biologically speaking, of these neurotransmitters being passed from cells to cells in your brain. Well, one big one that everybody's been talking about the last few years is dopamine. When you're in limerence, your dopamine is spiked. You're getting a lot more of it, which makes us feel good. Another one is serotonin, which serotonin, and when somebody's in limerence, drops. So serotonin has a couple basic functions. One of them is it's a mood stabilizer. So when our serotonin is dropped, we are more like a bipolar person. In fact, someone who is bipolar, if they're taking medication for it, it's something to help raise their serotonin level. So their swings are not so big. They're a little bit more flattened out. So when someone's in limerence, they have real high highs and real low lows. And then another thing that serotonin does, it's an inhibitor. I like to call it the Jiminy Cricket, because like in Pinocchio, Jiminy Cricket rolled around on Pinocchio's shoulder saying, when somebody was trying to talk him into doing something not good, Jiminy would be like, let's think this through. Is this a good idea? So when serotonin drops, it's like thumping Jiminy Cricket off your shoulder, and you
don't think it's clearly, right? I think in the book you gave, just to kind of prove the point of what happens in limerence and kind of the Jiminy Cricket not being on the shoulder, I think you had given an example of a teenage daughter having a conversation with her dad, and the dad said, I don't think this guy is good for you. Your boyfriend, he's no good. He's no good. He's doing drugs. And she's like, well, Daddy, he has to be able to afford to go to college, or, he has to be able to afford to live, and she was so blinded by this rose-colored glasses and the, love is blind in the beginning, the limerence that you talk about, that she had thrown all rationalization off of her shoulders, kind of the example you gave.
Yes. And it's important that to understand that men are the same way and it doesn't matter what age. I deal with a lot of extramarital affairs, especially in our intensives, and then following up with some of those couples. But and where I see it a lot, it's funny, not funny, it's sad, but how you'll hear people that are in an extramarital affair and they're church leaders. They might even be the pastor, which I dealt with a lot of pastors, or on the worship team or on the prayer team, and they have an extramarital affair with somebody else on the worship team. And so they're in this limerence with them. And they will they'll say things like, well, I know I'm meant to be with them because God brought us together because we're on the word. We met each other, on the worship team, serving God. That's the kind of thinking people will be in limerence. Now, don't hear me saying limerence is a bad thing. I think it's a way that we're designed by God. But the thing about one of the biggest things about it, of course, it runs this curve where as dopamine's rising and serotonin's dropping, it's literally what cocaine and meth do. They raise your dopamine levels and drop your serotonin. So that may be one reason why those are two such powerful drugs, because they mimic one of the best feelings in the world, being in love, right? But then what happens, and my short definition for limerence is it's the illusion of full acceptance. So once the couple starts doing more of real life together, and they start noticing some stuff that, oh, I don't fully accept that. I don't fully accept that. And they start to they'll start off by pointing it out. I wish you need to stop doing that, or I wish you wouldn't do this. And that doesn't work. And so then they try to change them, a bunch of different ways they can try to change them. But the trying to change somebody is the exact opposite of why they fell in love in the first place, because they thought they were fully accepted. So then the curve starts going down and it gets back to where the dopamine's back to regular levels and serotonin's back up to its regular level. And that typically, on average, that lasts 6 to 18 months, so about a year. Now, when I first started learning about it and on all the research on it, I would getting angry with God, because I was like, why do you do this to us? Yeah. Why do you give us this great feeling and then it goes away? And then I started thinking, okay, I started realizing more and more with working more and more with couples. If we start having children and we're still in limerence, when you're in limerence with somebody and they are with you, you don't care about anything else. You don't care about other relationships, all that stuff. You just wish you could go and get backpacks and travel the world on a train together, So if you have a pregnancy during this time, which is where most first pregnancies happen, when that child is born, you're still in limerence. That child at best is going to have severe diaper rash because you're not thinking about changing its diapers as often as you should. More often, though, you're going to neglect the child and maybe even abuse it because it's a hindrance to your relationship. It's just a bother. So the limerence needs to go away so that we can give some of ourselves to our children too and let them give to us. But why does it have to start in the first place? So I'd like to imagine that everybody has you have a YouTube video that you could pull up that would show your life being married to anybody in the world. You just type in their name and social security number or whatever, and you get a 20-minute or 15-minute video of the highlights and the lowlights of life with them. Well, what you're going to see is some pain. Yeah. And some hurt and some betrayal. And those things are going to make you say, I'm not going to get married. So none of us, I don't think, would ever commit to a life with somebody if we didn't have this thing that kind of kick-started.
Sure. Yeah,
So,
that makes a lot of sense. What do you think is a tip then once a couple, I mean, maybe someone's dating right now and maybe they're starting to kind of, the rose-colored glasses are coming off. And, another example from the book was their spouse talked a lot when they were dating and was that you guys? Was that Joanna? Does she talk a lot? She talks a lot, right? Or somebody, there's an example that you said,
yes.
You said that, that you, there might've been another example in the book that someone's spouse talked a lot and it was driving them crazy, but that's actually what attracted to them in the first spot when they were dating. And okay. So what is your advice then if things like that are starting to become, if a couple is starting to come out of that limerence and they're like, oh my gosh, that drives me crazy. How can they move towards acceptance of each other? What would be your advice for our listeners?
Yeah. This is a really important thing before I lead into the answering that question. How we think and how we feel towards or about our spouse has more to do with what we ourselves do than what they do. So yes, what they do does influence how we think and feel, but not nearly as much as what we do. Mm. And so in the example with Joanna, I started focusing on that and what I had previously called gregarious, friendly, warm, outgoing. I started reframing that and calling it talks too much. Mm. So I was actually, this was about years 3 or 4 of our marriage, and I was having lunch with one of the elders at our church, and he was asking me, how's my marriage going? And I was like, it's hard sometimes, but it'd sure be a lot easier if Joanna didn't talk so much. And he said, well, she was always that way. And I was like, he said, you need to start thanking God for that. And I was like, I can't honestly thank God that she talks too much. He goes, no. You framed it as talk too much. You used to say, oh, she's outgoing, gregarious, warm, all that stuff. That's what you need to be thinking. You need to make sure every day that you at least one time thank God for those things about her. And by the way, John, you probably have a lot more friends because of, you're definitely right. Yeah. So first of all, you can't change somebody. And when you spend your time doing that, you're wasting your resources. When I say resources, your time, your energy, even your money trying to get them changed. It's like if you're struggling with money and you think that the cure to that is to drive down the highway and throw what money you do have out the window. It's just crazy. A lot of our frustration with other people and their habits or their behavior is really frustration with ourselves. Mm. We're frustrated with ourselves because we're burning up resources on something we can't buy.
Yeah.
And so instead, what we can do is praise them for what's good about them. And not only does that make them like us better and want to do more of that, it also makes us like them better because we're focused on how God sees them.
Yeah. Yeah, it changes your heart. You had said in the book that of starting to plant a seed of like callousness towards your spouse, but once you uprooted that and started, kind of affirming even to God, like, thank you for how you created Joanna, it changed. And then you started to appreciate that again.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Awesome. A neat little trick that Joanne and I try to practice as much as we can. In fact, we learned it years ago taking a parenting class with Tim Kimmel. I don't know if you ever heard of him. But we tell each other, I love everything about you. And you can honestly say that if you're looking through the lens that God looks at us through.
Yeah,
which
that's
good. Who you really are is 100% lovable. And so I can honestly say, I love everything about you.
Yeah.
We're not saying I love everything you've done or that you do or that you will do, but who you truly are is 100% lovable.
Yeah. And that's showing acceptance to your spouse.
Yeah.
Like, I accept you. I see you. I accept you.
Yeah.
I love you for exactly who you are.
Yeah.
That's so good.
It's so good. It's just that change, that change of perspective. I love what you said when you look at that through the lens, how God sees her. That's such a good word. I like that. Jon, there's two topics I want to make sure we dive into here, because I thought the book was so amazing and how it kind of talked about this. And it's two things that, when I first read it, I was a little bit like, wow, okay, that's a little different idea. I hadn't thought of it that way. The first one is happiness. And I want to read a quote from the book here. I wrote it down because this is what jumped out at me. It says, if you can't be happily married to your spouse, then you won't be happy not being married to your spouse. And I was like, wow, I feel like that is a bold statement. Maybe tell us what you mean by this. Like, what does that quote mean? And how do we look at that? How does happiness look at a marriage?
I want to qualify that first. Please don't hear me saying that if your spouse is abusive, that you stay in there and take it. It's not loving to be a punching bag to anybody. You're not loving them. Sometimes love means that you have to get away from that person. I mean, move away from that person.
Yeah.
That said, when we set somebody else up to be the gatekeeper of our own happiness, it will fail eventually, 100% of the time, because they're not going to be able to do everything we want them to do to make us happy. And in fact, when we are when we're relying on somebody else for our own happiness, then we are powerless. They're the ones that hold the power to our happiness, right? And when we do that, we give them a power that they can't fulfill. I cannot be to anyone their source of happiness, and Joanna can't be to me my source of happiness. Now, the neat thing about this, the more that you practice, and there's sometimes where I have to 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 times on certain days that I remind myself, Jon, remember, you have fired Joanna from being responsible for your happiness. Right now, you're not doing that, But the more you practice this, and the more that the more you practice this, when your spouse then does loving stuff for you, you see it as a gift.
Sure.
When you're making them responsible for your happiness and they do something loving for you, you just see that as, oh, okay, great, you're doing your job finally, You don't appreciate it. But when you have absolved them from being the source of your happiness and they do something loving for you, you see it as a gift. And so you respond differently to them. You're thankful to them. And when you're thankful for them, then they want to do it more. So the original title of that chapter was The Pursuit of Crappiness. The publisher wouldn't let me use that word. But it's when we are pursuing happiness, then what we are trying to do is arrange things exterior to us the way I want them to be, right? It's a different thing that joy. Joy comes from the inside. And I can have joy, as Paul says, in any circumstance. I can be, chained to a 2,000-year-old dungeon, rat-infested prison and still have joy and sing. But happiness, and by the way, I love it when I'm happy. It's great. But if I'm pursuing happiness, that means I'm trying to arrange things exterior. And most of that is people.
Yeah.
And when I try to manipulate what's exterior, then those are people most of the time, then, well, people don't like to be manipulated, right? We don't like somebody to try to control us. And so what we're going to get when we pursue happiness is actually less happiness.
We did a sermon recently. Yeah, I was going to say, we did a sermon recently about, and that was one of the points, is that, happiness is fleeting. It's about seeking holiness, knowing that our joy comes from the Lord. I think later on in the book, you had a quote from Gary Smalley where he talked about, two half people don't make a whole. You each need to be whole on your own to have a really healthy relationship. I love that quote. We've heard that before, and it's so good. But as you talked about, your spouse can't be the source of your happiness because it's all circumstantial. Something's going to happen. I mean, one day after you're married, 1 hour after you're married, something's bound to happen. They're going to forget something. They're going to disappoint you. They can't be your source. God is the source of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have a response?
No. I mean, I think it's so good. I think so often we hear this from different people of like, oh, they don't make me happy anymore. And, I think that's why that quote resonated so much with me of just, it just brings up the question of what's going on internally. Are you trying to have an internal need met externally?
Sure.
By someone else?
Yeah. Well, Joanne and I, just maybe 2 or 3 years before Gary Smalley died, we were at a church. He had come to town to speak, and we were there. And he said something at that he said, one of the most romantic things you can tell your spouse is, I don't need you. And he kind of paused, and everybody looked at each other, and he said, but I want you.
Yeah.
And it's two different things. So, he's in essence saying this. When we need that other person, we are saddling up with something that they can't do. We're giving them the impossible task.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the more that I just choose joy, I'm going to get more happiness anyway. The more I just choose joy, and that, okay, I don't need Joanna to behave a certain way for me to be happy. Then again, I'm going to bring a healthier self. It's kind of like if this idea, what was the movie with Tom Cruise and
Jerry Maguire?
Yeah, Jerry Maguire. You complete me, and that's how I think a lot of people think. That whole idea is like thinking, okay, he's got COVID, she's got the flu. If they just get together, they're going to make each other healthy.
Right.
Yeah.
John,
that's why I don't like that phrase. My better. No.
Yeah.
Joanna's my better whole.
Oh, that's a good word.
That's good. John, the other topic that was so good was the idea of, this book is full of great topics, but one thing to dive into here is the idea of what commitment is and what commitment is not in a marriage. There is a line at the end of the book where you had said commitment is more about what we do, not what we don't do. Can you tell us a little more about this and maybe give an example?
Yeah, I grew up a PK, and Joanna's dad was an elder for years. So we both were raised with an idea of commitment, but I don't know that anybody really ever fleshed that out. My idea going into marriage was, if I'm a committed husband, that means I don't have sex with anybody else and that I don't leave her. Which is two good things to be committed to, but I was committed to those principles. I think commitment is God. Yeah, God principles are there. But, just like Jesus would get on to the Pharisees, you worship the principles instead of what they're about, loving God and loving God's children. And so I hung on to those two principles, and I thought, as long as I'm not doing those two things, I'm a good husband. I'm a committed husband. And it wasn't until I was in my internship for marriage and family therapy, and I'm 31 years old or something. And I have this couple that's been married 30 years in front of me. And the wife says, I just don't think he's committed to me. And he jerked around and is like, what? How can you say that? I've never cheated on you, and I'll never leave you. And she said, yeah, I'm talking about committed to me, not to those principles. And it just struck me. Oh, wow. I think I'm hearing what Joanna's been trying to tell me for years now. Commitment, I think God's more concerned with us being committed to the person, not to this institution we call marriage, which is great. But what's more important is not the title of our relationship or the piece of paper, but are we committed to that person? So when we're committed to a person, it becomes more what we do, not that, okay, I don't drink, I don't smoke. As my dad used to say, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't go with girls. No. Well, what was it? It rhymed, but I don't smoke, I don't chew, I don't go with girls who do. That's what he used to say.
In the book, you gave an example that drove this point home for me. You said saying those two things, like, hey, I'm committed to not divorcing you and I'm committed to not sleeping with anyone else, is like going to your job and saying, hey, I'm committed to not quitting and I'm committed to only taking a paycheck from you as my employer. If you said that at your review, you would probably be fired. Like that's a really low kind of like low bar to. No, it's so much more than that for your job. That's a great example because you would be expected to be growing and learning and training and getting better. And then you go on and shared some examples of what commitment looks like. You had said commitment is being there, committing to being there, committing to investing in the relationship, committing to growth, committing to support social structures, to supportive social structures, commitment to having no alternatives, and things like that. Commitment's so much more than just not leaving.
Yeah, and by the way, that's not an exhaustive list. That's just the areas where I most often see people omitting from their commitment. Yeah,
sure.
There's a lot of ways to show commitment and being committed more than that simple list. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. Just that awareness of really expanding our thinking in that area.
Yeah. I love John. So my day job is in finance. So I love that you equated it to this in the book. You had it similar to the commitment of building wealth, right? And a bank account. And it was like, are you trying to grow your bank account or keep it from going to zero or being overdrawn? I think a lot of us are trying to keep, let's just try to keep it above zero, right? And if it goes below, I'll just make another deposit. I'll just make a big deposit. I'll bring it back down and then I'll make another deposit. I'll bring it back down and kind of so on and so forth. But this idea of commitment is really along the lines of making continual deposits and seeing that balance grow in your account.
Yeah.
And I loved that, again, because I'm a finance guy, but I love that analogy of are you seeing that commitment grow in your marriage? Mm-hmm. Or are you making deposits, once a month and then you draw it all the way back down, or maybe even overdrawn where, if anybody's had overdrafts, there's fees, there's penalties, there's consequences. So I love how you made that analogy to building an account.
Yes. Yeah. It's why when people say marriage is hard work, yeah, sometimes it is. Sometimes anything that's good in life is hard work. Hmm. But for the most part, I don't think marriage is hard work. I think if you're doing marriage well, it makes life easier. But most of the time when I hear somebody saying marriage is hard work, it's because they're living in that trying to avoid bankruptcy instead of building wealth. So when you're always hovering just most of the time just above the zero line, but sometimes you then what you say or do when you're just above the zero line is going to have a lot more adverse effect than if you did the same thing or said the same thing to your spouse when you've got a whole bunch of money in the bank with them, right?
Yeah.
If you're always just hovering around zero, then you're always walking around eggshells, right? And so they're going to take things wrong more often. The little things are going to hurt worse. And so, yeah, you're just always, it's just like if with a bank account, you're always nervous. Am I going to have enough money to, pay next month's electricity bill or whatever? But when you have tons of money in the bank and you're adding to it, then the very same thing that really hurt them 5 years ago when you were hovering around zero, it may just flow off them like water off a duck's back, because it's like, oh, I know maybe they're having a bad day, or they probably didn't mean it that way. It's no big deal. We're going to be okay tomorrow because I know that you're building wealth with me.
Yeah. John, can you say that line again about marriage? Was it making marriage easy? Like marriage should make life easier?
Yeah, if you're doing marriage well, it makes life easier, I think. I can't imagine, for example, now being a grandparent with 7 grandkids, if Joanna was gone out of my life, I don't know how I would be able to have enough time to love all my grandkids that way that I could grandparent. Yeah, it's just, you're going to, the flip side of that, if you're throwing in everything to go through life with somebody, they're going to hurt you. You're going to hurt them. You're going to have some really rotten days, and you're going to run through some fires. But I don't think when somebody asks me, what's a good marriage? I'm like, well, it's you don't know until probably several years, because you got to go through some fires together till know if you have a good marriage. It's the good marriages are the ones that, there's been some big time betrayal or big time hurt or something like that. Usually on both parts, but so I don't know if I'm answering your question. I feel like
I think that's really good. I love that. That idea of like you're going to have to run through some fires. Yeah. Like there's going to be some things that happen. That doesn't mean like, oh, our marriage is bad. Like that's part of the process. And that, if you can have that mindset of this is going to happen, but on the other side of it,
it's worth it. You're going to be stronger.
You're going to be stronger. Yeah.
I do want to leave, as we kind of wrap up here, John, I appreciated that you shared this. You shared some stats in our book that I just kind of was prompted. It wasn't in our notes, but I wanted to look it up here because I think it's maybe hope-giving for our listeners. And you had quoted some research from researcher and author Shaunti Feldhahn, also guest of the Celebrate MarriageCast podcast. Yeah. She was amazing.
Oh, you've had Shaunti,
we have. And she had said the vast majority of marriages are happy. There's so much that feels like it's doom and gloom, and she says 72% of those married are still married to their first spouse. And then this one that I want to really drive home for our listeners, if you're going through something tough right now, know this. Out of this study that she did, she said of those who reported being very unhappy in their marriage, they said they were very unhappy. 80% reported being happily married just 5 years later with that same spouse.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was probably a lot of work to get to that spot, but I just feel like that's so hope-giving to know that. Pick up a copy of this book, get in the Word, pick up a copy of this book, get with, a professional counselor, and there's hope. And the principles that you give in this book are just, I think, so hope-giving and eye-opening. Yeah. So, John, do you have any... We have some guest questions for you if you want to partake in our fun guest questions. But as we kind of wrap up the interview part here, do you have any final parting thoughts or advice for our listeners? And where can they follow along and keep up with you and find the book?
Sure. Well, you get the book off of, Barnes and Nobles or Amazon. And by the way, and it's been a couple of weeks since I checked on this. This is the second edition of this book. The Amazon has both editions on it, the old one and the new one, and the old one comes up first. So the old one is the yellow cover. This one is the white cover.
I was just going to say that. I saw a different cover. This one, I do like this cover update. It looks very modern and fresh, but it's called The Acceptance by Jon R. Anderson, and you can find it on Amazon. We'll link that in our show notes too. Okay, great. Yeah. And then you can go to our website, growinglovenetwork.org. If you want to know about our intensives, we call that Love Reboot. And then I do several retreats for churches. We call that My Love Lasts a Year. If you, speaking engagements or retreats or whatever, you can get in touch with me through that. Awesome.
I will say probably one of the important things to know about intensives, if a couple is struggling or worse, in crisis, and a lot of people don't want to say we're in crisis, but if either one of you is even thinking about divorce or separation, you're in crisis. Mm. If one person has threatened it and they don't really mean it, that's got to be dealt with. As a therapist, I work with a lot of couples. But when they come to me for the first time, I'll say, I'm going to do an assessment with you first. And then almost probably 95% of the time, I say, I'm not going to see you again until you go through a reputable intensive. Because although counseling or therapy is often the best second step for a struggling couple, the data bears it out. Gottman's Institute did research on this years ago. Willard Harley, some of those Smalleys will tell you the same thing. Counseling or therapy is not the place to start. You need to get to an intensive first. It's very unlikely that as a first step that the counseling or therapy is going to be effective. In fact, it probably will just discourage the couple more. And I don't want to go into all reasons behind that if somebody wants to email me and ask me why that is, but I don't want to take up this time for that. But yeah, so that's why I started doing intensives about 20 years ago. I was in private practice and I found out about doing these. So
awesome. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I'd not really heard of marriage intensives before until this. So that's great. Just awareness for just kind of like a deep, literally a deep intensive for a couple for the weekend or however long are they? Are they over weekends or?
Yes, we do ours on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Okay.
It's a 3-day. There's some that are, there's some out there that have a good track record. Make sure there's people that are trying to do their own intensives and they don't know what they're doing. So make sure it's a reputable one, a good track record. And there's several across the country that have good track records. Smalley Institute has a good one. Marriage Dynamics has a good one. Some of those, but I forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, but get to a reputable intensive as your starting point. And,
perfect. We can put those links in the notes.
I had done intensives on a contract basis for a few other organizations. And in 2011, one of the reasons we started Growing Love Network is because at the time, which is 14 years ago, the least expensive reputable intensive was $2,500. And some of them these days are in the tens of thousands. And, but none of them offered scholarship. So about half the couples that come to ours get a scholarship assistance. The sticker price is $990, which is way less than what others charge. But we partner with churches to do this, to bring down the costs. And then we have donors to make that affordable. And about half the couples that come get scholarships. So our goal is to make sure that cost is not the barrier for anybody to get a good intensity.
Cool. Very cool.
Perfect. Well, Jon, this has been so good. One of the things we like to do with all of our guests, we have 3 kind of rapid fire questions we like to ask all of our guests. So if you're willing to answer, we can buzz through them here.
Okay, I might lie, but go ahead.
Perfect.
No lying. You gotta be honest. God's watching this, but have fun with it if you're up for the challenge.
Absolutely. Okay. So the first one, Jon, what is your marriage why? Why is marriage important to you?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, because I'm married to such a wonderful person. I'm married to my favorite person. I wouldn't have said that 37 years ago. 37 years ago, I would have said, do I have to do this the rest of my life?
Wow.
But Joanne and I then went to our first marriage seminar, and that's when we started saying, we're going to do something intentional every year to grow our marriage. And it's just gotten better and better since then. Another reason, though, is to me, marriage it's like, I'm not saying that everybody should get married, but I think by God's design, it's the main way that the main life experience that helps us to see and understand and become more godly in the first.
That's a great answer.
Yeah. That's a really great answer. All right. Number 2, Jon, best date night.
My best date night?
Yeah.
I like it. We both like this. When we have a big date, like going out to eat somewhere nice and having to get dressed up and spending quite a bit of money and all that. When Joanna, it comes to that afternoon and Joanna says, want to just order in and watch a movie? And I'm like, yeah. To me, date night should be happening almost every day. I think it is important that we invest our money and our time into having those occasional, things that bite your wallet and you have to plan and get fixed up for. I think those are important. But Joanne and I, when we were dating, we were college students and we had no money. But we almost every day, we weren't able to see each other, we were on the phone for 2.5 hours that night. It's not going out to dinner and a movie. Dating is this process where you can be just sharing a milkshake or going on a walk, but you're having these discussions where it's safe. You know that you're not going to, when you're trying to fall in love with somebody, or get them to fall in love with you, you don't talk about finances and how we're going to rear the kids and discipline the kids and what's wrong with us. That should all be off limits. That you have maybe even a space in your house at a certain time that you can go to that space and from 5:30 to 6:30 any Monday through Friday. And if the other person joins you, there's rules that we're not going to talk about what's wrong with anything. We're just going to get to know each other better. And so a great topic is just, so what was it like to be you today?
That's a great question.
That's a great question. I love that. Yeah. All right, Jon, number 3, final one here. After almost 40 years of marriage, what's bringing you joy right now in your marriage?
Probably what I'm most excited about now is Joanne and I having a house, not being in an apartment where we're always frustrated with the management, with them not keeping things up. That we get to keep up ourselves, and we're already getting excited because I like to work with wood and handyman kind of thing, and we're going to build this and do all this together. So that would be number 2, and number 1 is just our kids and our grandkids. That we're all 2 of our kids and their spouses and kids live within walking distance, and the other one's only like 3 miles away now. So that's we're getting to have some good years right now.
So cool.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, Jon, thank you so much. This has been so good, and I would encourage everyone, grab a copy of the book. It was so good. We both thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for writing it. This idea of acceptance of we said at the very beginning of just really truly accepting that person that you're with. I think there was a quote, Michelle, you told me this last night about like waking up to that same person day after day after day and having it be such a joy. And that's what the book is, acceptance. And so, Jon, thank you so much for writing the book, for coming on the show. We so appreciate you and giving us time here today.
Oh, this was a lot of fun for me. Yeah, even if I can just keep 2 people awake listening to you.
Absolutely. Well, and thank you to you, the listener. Thanks for joining us today on the Celebrate MarriageCast. If you'd like further help or resources on marriage and family, visit us at Celebrate.church/marriage. And if you don't have a church home, we'd love to have you check us out this weekend. Our address and service times are at Celebrate.church. Have a great week, everyone.